Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. In this one, I am just going to go over one of the games that I just played. I just had a nice little rapid chess session on chess.com, and I got a couple nice wins. This was one of them that I liked quite a bit. And I was just going to kind of demonstrate what simple, straightforward play can look like at like the club player level, and how you can win games really easily without overcomplicating the game, doing any fancy tactics, or even having a knowledge of the opening. So I'm just going to jump right into it here. I was black in this game, and my opponent starts with d4. And against d4, I always respond with knight f6. I'm aware vaguely of some of the king's Indian lines, some of the Nimzo Indian lines, and some of the Grunfeld lines, but I'm really not that familiar with the rest of the opening ideas from this. And I don't study the openings that much, so it's just not that relevant to me. I just try to play based on what my opponent's doing, and I just try to look for tactics in the position as they build up, and I try to go from there. So this, and I'll tell you what, it's a good thing I don't rely on my opening knowledge that much, because immediately here the computer recognizes this as the Trompowsky attack. I've heard people say that. I have no idea what you're supposed to do. So in this game, I just went h6. I just want him to decide with the bishop, what were you going to do? And I like responding in this way, especially whenever my opponents play something that I'm not aware of, because if I play something natural, like the best move from the computer, for instance, is d5, well, then he'll probably just maintain this pin. Well, it's not actually a pin until I move the e-pawn, I guess, but he'll maintain the pressure against the knight with his bishop, and I don't want to deal with that, and I feel like he's used to these positions. So in that essence, psychologically, I'm just giving him what he wants. I'm just going to do normal development, and he's going to play his attack, and I'm going to play my game. But instead, I want him to answer me. And it's not as straightforward as like having the initiative right off the bat, because the game's just not decided over h6 or anything, but I'm forcing him to say, I'm going to trade my bishop, or I'm going to keep it alive, and I'm going to put it somewhere where it's not used to being. In this case, he just trades it immediately to double up my pawns, which is perfectly reasonable. But I was okay with this too, because then I'm opening both the diagonals here. Although the queen is quote unquote cut short, I knew that my king would be safe over here if I castled with the majority of pawns. So I was okay with this. I was like, I get fast development. I'm on board. Let's do it. So moving forward, he goes e4 just to take space. And then you have a couple options here. In my opinion anyway, the couple options that I was looking at was, I was thinking about going c5 and just kind of sacking the pawn to get more development. Well, I guess it's not sacking the pawn, but giving him that pawn for more development. But I didn't really want to see him play d5, and things get kind of weird. I also thought about maybe doing something strange like queen e7 just to immediately hit this. But after something like that, it's no good. I can't get my dark square bishop out to pin the knight against the king. So I didn't want to do anything like that. So I pretty much just immediately decided to play d5. And I just wanted to kind of bring up those being the options that I thought about. I still played this move pretty well much instantly. And that's, I think, one of the most important things, especially if you're a straightforward player like I am. Whenever I'm playing games and I'm actually playing them with the intention to win, I make these decisions very, very quickly. I'm not trying to calculate what's going to happen if he pushes, I take, he takes, well, that'd probably just be super good for me. But, any kind of weird tactics at this point, for the most part, if a move looks agreeable, if there's not instantly some, 2 or 3 move tactic that I can see where I'm losing, I'm going to play it if it looks straightforward and good to me. So I go d5 here with the idea that if he takes and I recapture and he goes knight c3, then I can go bishop b4 and pin the knight. And that's exactly what happens in the game. Very straightforward. I'm sure this is some main line of this, probably without h6, but I'm sure this is some pseudo main line of this. I don't think I'm reinventing the wheel here. But what I did like about this is that we're fighting for the initiative. I recapture the pawn with my queen, so now material's even, but then he goes for knight c3 and he's trying to attack me, but then I pin him and I'm trying to attack him. And this is just kind of how tactics can be born out of the position. And what's really important, I think, at like the club player level, around 1500, 1600, 1700, that's about where I'm at. I think around this level, whenever I'm winning games consistently, it's whenever I'm making these decisions and I'm making them very quickly so as to not run out of time. Because this is 10+0 time control. Like I said at the start of the video, it's a rapid time control. So this is 10+0. So you want to make decisions like this quickly. And you also want to make sure, again, that they are solid so that you're saving time for whenever you do have to calculate and look at tactics. And we're going to get into a little bit of that here in just a moment. So I go here, pin the knight, so he can't take the queen. He goes knight e2. Now, I think me and him probably follow the same thought process on this move, which as I was looking at it, I was like, okay, he can go knight e2 so that, he can recapture this knight if I were to ever take. But I don't actually think that's what he should be doing. And you'll kind of see why. in my head, I figure, you know, if I take he recaptures with pawn, well, then it's kind of locking up the center, and we both have a set of double pawns, but nothing bad's really happening on either side of the board that way. Like, I'm going to get castled and be okay. He probably won't castle queenside, but he's probably not going to have too many problems just getting developed and castling kingside. But by going knight e2, he's hampering the development of his bishop. And it's going to be awkward because he can never play this as long as my queen's on the diagonal. So he's got to find a different way to kick my queen out of town. So the other move that I thought he was going to play right before he played knight e2 was actually queen d2 to say, okay, I'm not actually pinned anymore. Now I can actually take your queen. But he didn't go for that. He did go for knight e2. So he goes knight e2, and I just go ahead and castle. I just want to get out of here. Like I said, I know that even if he gets a kingside attack going with this 4 pawns, I don't think it's ever going to work. And as long as I'm watching out for, you know, tactics, I believe I should be fine here. And we'll see that again come into play a little bit more here in just a second. So he goes queen d3. And the idea with queen d3 here is to get castled queenside, you know, get out of all this the action that's happening in the center, and then to start the attack on the king side. I think that's definitely his plan here. You know, if he can resolve this tension with a castle, then he'll be on my queen, and all that's well and good. I didn't think that this was such a great idea for him, so I just go ahead and kick the queen back. So the computer actually recognizes queen d3 as the best move, and it says that this is a slight inaccuracy, but I'm not going to go into why, because I just don't think it was relevant at the time we were spending in the game. So at this point, both of us had spent less than a minute. It's only like 40 seconds. And this isn't like a losing move by any means, but it's like a slight inaccuracy, you know? But what I liked about this move is, again, it's saying, okay, you have to answer me, right? Like, there's no piece he can put in front of his queen, like no pawn he can use to block. He can't just counterattack my bishop or anything like that to try and get it to piss off. He's got to answer with his queen and go somewhere else. I think the move the computer likes is like this or something. I don't know. I'm not even going to bother looking at it. But that was just my idea behind this move. And again, I played it very quickly. So I've only spent 40 minutes on the clock, or 40 minutes on the clock, 40 seconds on the clock. And this move is coming with a tempo. It's well protected by my queen, and it's getting my development. With this open E file, it's even more critical that he answers these things correctly and quickly, because I'm going to go knight c6 and rook e1 and or rook e8 and d8, and then a lot is going to be coming down these 2 files towards him. So he needs to hurry up, answer my threats, and get castled. And I think that is why he just went immediately back to queen d2. So he kind of lost a tempo here. And really, if he was going to go queen d2, he probably shouldn't have went knight e2 in the first place. So I think he lost a lot of time here. And I think at this point in the game, I had him pretty uncomfortable. I don't think you're playing this move and you're feeling very good about it. On top of that, you're still setting yourself up with the pin on the knight. So even though it's not an absolute pin anymore to the king, it's still pinned to the queen. That being said, because I had such a nice initiative going here, I didn't want to let him just trade the queens off. So I went ahead and captured, and I figured he was going to recapture with knight here, which I think is worse. I think you should recapture with queen or with pawn. Either one is probably fine. But I don't think you should recapture with knight, and we're going to see why. So he recaptures with knight, and now he's still throwing a punch at my queen, but I get this intermediate check first. And what's important about this is with the intermediate check, you know, he can't just castle out a check. And now he has to say, okay, how am I going to block this check? Because if he just sidesteps, okay, I'm super comfortable. I'm completely okay with that. I'll just scoop my queen back, just say d7, and I'm just going to enjoy my nice comfortable position. Not a problem at all. But I don't think he's going to do that. So I think he's either going to block with the knight or he's going to block with the bishop. Now, if he blocks with the bishop, he drops the pawn. And if he blocks with the knight, well then, okay, why did you ever move it, you know, this way and then back in the first place? And then I'm just going to get knight c6. Suddenly I'm doubled up on the pawn. You know, he can castle at that point. I can go here. And then I just have a target. You know, I have something to gang up on. Not to mention there's going to be pressure against e2 where the knight is sitting. So there's a lot of easy threats for me to generate, and it's not as easy for him to generate them. On top of that, you know, if on this check, if he were to go knight e2, and let's just say I go knight c6, and he castles, just tactically, he's dropping the pawn on a2. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, I don't know if I'd take that pawn. It looks a little risky to me, especially in a faster time control. I might just drop my bishop back or something, or maybe start with h5, or a4, a5, a5, a4. Oh my God, I can't talk. But yeah, that's just the idea, that the pressure is on him. You know, I definitely have the initiative at that point. And on these last couple moves, I actually spent quite a bit of time. So I wanted to figure this out because I felt like this was kind of the critical moment in the game. I felt like I got him to waste his tempo. So I spent a minute on whether or not I wanted to capture here. He did capture back instantly. And so then I went for this, and he did block with the bishop. So now it's a question, after blocking with the bishop, okay, you know, are there tactics here? Do I have some weird kind of like sacrifice and do some, weird tempo to get to his king? The answer is no. There's no immediate tactics here. The best move is, in fact, to say, you don't have anything, I'm taking the pawn. And so I did. I took the pawn, but I gave it quite a bit of consideration. I spent about a minute and a half on this move, and this was my biggest think of the game. So a minute and a half spent here, and I just wanted to make sure that the obvious, right? So I'm taking here, I'm hitting the rook. Well, it's pretty clear to me that he's going to castle, and then I think the initiative could very quickly go his way. But with my minute and a half, I calculated that if he castles here, okay, I can't take here because then rook here, and then he's going to win the bishop here, which apparently there are some funny tactics with this, which I can actually stop him from winning the bishop outright. But that's what I saw, so I didn't want to go into that. I was like, okay, so if I'm only keeping the one pawn, what's this probably going to look like? Well, I figured it was if I do take on g2 and he castles, then I can go knight c6 like I do in the game, just to continue my development. And then he's going to throw a punch with one of the rooks. I actually figured he'd go with this rook, but he goes with this rook in the game. And then I'm going to go queen h3, and this is all what happened in the game, but this is what I saw. I figured I could do this. He could go queen g3, or I'm sorry, rook g3, and then I would go queen g4, queen h4. Terrible with coordinates. I'm trying to get better. Anyway, queen h4. And what queen h4 is doing here is it's eyeballing this check, right? Obviously getting out of the attack from the rook. But what's important about this is there's no easy way for him to immediately throw another punch at my queen, right? Like if you look at it, there's nothing he can really do. He has no pawns that can attack it because I'm on the edge of the board. I just took his g-pawn. He can't attack it with the rook, guarded by the bishop because my bishop's covering that square. He has no knight move to immediately threaten it. In fact, he doesn't really have a good knight move at all. And he has no like dark square bishop or other knight over here to try and get to it. So once I established that my queen was going to be safe on h4, I said, okay, that's fine. I'm good with playing knight c6 all the way back here. Because if I'm not okay with playing knight c6 here, I'm probably wanting to move my queen at this point so that, his rook isn't staring down my king. But I didn't think he had anything. And he doesn't. He, in fact, doesn't. He goes for this. And I thought this was just like a straight up blunder. I think the computer definitely gives me quite a bit of an advantage here, but I don't know if it was a straight up blunder. But again, I wanted to demonstrate this game as an example of straightforward winning. This is what I thought I did best this game. This move does immediately drop the pawn on d4. You can actually just go ahead and take it with the knight, and then if he captures on f5, you can recapture with the knight, and then you're hitting the rook. Good things are happening. I didn't see this line. I just thought, this is hanging, so I need to do something with this guy. And that's what happens whenever you're trying to think quickly and play quickly. And I didn't want to fall too behind in time. So at this point, I have 6 minutes on the clock. He has 7 minutes. So I just went ahead and captured the bishop, because if he recaptures with the queen, I can just recapture with the knight, or I can recapture the pawn on d4 with the queen. In fact, no matter what he does, I'm capturing on d4 with the queen. So I know that I can play this move instantly, and that's what's important to me. And I figured after I did that, I had a nice big center. Wasn't really much he could do about it. He does recapture with the queen. So then I capture on d4 with the queen, and then he tries to avoid the queen trade. And this is something that I figured he was going to try to do, which is why whenever I recaptured here, I actually spent a little bit of time looking at whether or not the knight recapture would be better, especially because the knight's looking to jump in here and hit the rook, but this knight's guarding it, and I don't think this knight's ever going to move. He doesn't have good moves. Like, he can't go here basically ever, otherwise the rook's going to capture it after the queen moves, And going backwards, no good. Going forwards isn't really doing anything. These squares are all pretty much covered by my pieces. So I didn't feel like this knight was going to move. So I didn't think, trying to jump in with my knight and look at this fork was really in the future with how simple and open this position was. I figured the two main things in this position were, one, I could get a material advantage, and then two, I could simplify the position. So by being up this one pawn, I figured if I could keep a hold of that one pawn at least, and simplify the position, I'd be totally winning. So here's me picking up a second pawn, in fact. And then he does, like I predicted, he does try to keep the queens on the board. And I couldn't tell you exactly what this move is trying to do, but tactically, there are a couple things up in the air, right? So I figure at some point, he's looking to sacrifice here. Now, he actually needs his queen, like, somewhere easily accessible on this file whenever he goes for this sacrifice, because whenever he goes for this sacrifice, it's going to be, well, here, let me make a move. Well, it never works for him, does it? But, if I just do something dumb, I don't actually know if the sacrifice ever works, but usually the idea with this is that you do this, you do your checks, and then it doesn't really matter where I go. Let's just say, well, in this game, I'm probably getting out if I go that way. But if I do something dumb like this, right, then he wants to be able to play like queen here, or queen here, or queen here, so that he has like this on the next move. Like, let's just say, for example, he does this and my queen wasn't here. Let's just say my queen was over yonder doing something else, just for an example. Then he's getting this checkmate, right? And like, even on this tempo, I can't ever do this, with the idea of one rook not being here, because then he'd get this checkmate. And I know this is a big stretch. This is, club level, low level analysis, but I'm just trying to what I'm trying to demonstrate are these are the patterns that I figured he was looking for. And, for all these reasons, my queen being in a great square in the center of the board, his queen not having access to the G file very easily, I am having the doubled rooks on the back rank, and my king having plenty of squares to run to, and I could probably even, after recapture, run to the center of the board. Like, all these reasons are why I weren't worried, or why I wasn't worried. That's not how you grammar. Why I wasn't worried about the attack actually completing successfully. So I figured he was going to have to take time to double up, and he never had time to do it. So after he moves the queen, again, I just wanted to make sure he didn't have like capture, because this is pinned and I can't recapture. It's like, nope, okay, my queen's got it covered. So what I can do is I can actually just kick away the queen. So I go with rook e5, sneak peek here. He does go queen f3. I go rook e5 just to kick away the queen. Now, I was hoping this is just an example of with straightforward play, how you can, set traps and tactics and everything. There's always something pseudo lurking beneath the depths, and you'd be surprised how often people fall for it. I do think there are some people who would go ahead and play queen captures on f6, and this is obviously a blunder because of this check, and this is the idea. It looks like I left this pawn hanging and it was only guarded by my queen, but if you go for this, I just get the check. After you recapture, I pick up the queen, and I'm completely winning. So he doesn't have that. From here, he's just got to move his queen away. I didn't really care where he went. What was just important to me is that he didn't have a lot of good options. If he goes queen g4, I'm just going to trade queens, right? And then whenever the smoke settles, I'm chilling. If he goes for this, I mean, I can do this. I could even go here and just say, you have to trade with me now. And then after he trades, I've got the better rook. I'm controlling this square. I can jump in and look for my fork. It doesn't matter. I'm up 2 pawns. I can do whatever I want. Like, I'm just totally winning. So I knew he couldn't trade queens at this point either. So I was very comfortable with just throwing another punch at it, just saying, okay, I have the initiative, you answer me. And so he does. He moves back queen f3, one of the better squares for the queen. But I still have lots of good simple moves. So I just double up on the file, threatening to go here and start an attack on the back rank. Now, there's nothing concrete here. It's not like an automatic win. He's got good defenders of the back rank. These guys are coordinating on this square. Right now, he's still got this rook back here. But what's important is I'm threatening to further simplify the position, and there's not really anything he can do to make it sharper. Like, at this point, he's just dead lost. You can try and play on, but like, I wouldn't even have a move to recommend. Like, you can't trade queens. There's no tactics. All my pieces are defended. You've got a couple threats here, but how are you ever going to make it work? I can't blame him for playing it on. I probably would have done the same thing he did, which is just line up your rooks, try and get this. Maybe I slip up. Maybe I do something stupid like a check, and then I just drop my queen for no reason. Or maybe I go for some weird sacrifice thinking I have a back rank mate, and I don't, something stupid like that. But again, this just leads to even more simplification. So I just go rook e1. He has to recapture, obviously. If you do anything else, you're asking to get slapped. If you do something like this, I can just force the trade here. I also have this pressure. There might even be some cute tricks at this point in the position, but without a doubt, I would have just captured. And like I said before, continued to simplify the position because there's just nothing he can do. He doesn't do that. He does trade rooks. I complete the trade. He goes back with the knight, and I just go forward with my knight. This is probably a small important note, which is that going forward with the knight, he still doesn't have this tactic. I can jump forward with my knight with check and then pick up his queen just like before, but you do want to stay aware of that, which I was whenever I made the move. That was the idea. Also, with this move, you are giving up this pawn. So if you're giving up that pawn, you better make sure you're doing it with a reason. I'm not getting back rank checkmated because I have the h7 square for my king, and I'm bringing my knight closer to the action. If he were to move his queen away from this file, also, he would get checkmated immediately. That's the big threat. And this is, I haven't done any crazy tactics to get to this position. It's just very simple, very straightforward, just trying to simplify the position, but it's coming with big threats. And there's not much he can do about it. So he goes for a nifty counterattack here with c3. I don't play the best move. I think it's actually only the third best move here, but it doesn't matter. Basically, anything you're looking at here is winning. I think even just capturing here is literally winning. So like, just everything's good. But I go for the very simple, okay, if you want to trade queens, we can trade queens. I'm going to get a third pawn for my efforts. And then here, I am threatening to fork the rook and the king, and he just completely wastes another tempo. I don't know if he didn't see this or what went through his mind, but it's kind of hard to move the knight, being that it's pinned. So you got to get out of the pin. You can't go up with your king. I figured he'd play king d2. I think that's the most obvious move, but he does not. He goes here instead, which does nothing because then I just play the same thing because you're still getting forked. His cute idea was to go king d2 afterwards, I guess, saying, well, you take mine, I'll take yours, but that's good for me because at the end I get the a2 pawn. So now I'm up 4 pawns, and there's just nothing. I mean, it's been over for a while, but again, this is just a perfect example of how you just simplify, just continuously make threats, and there's just nothing you can do. I just held the initiative, and he didn't have a moment to complicate the game. So he goes knight c3, I trade it off, and if you're like me, you might be scared you could still mess this up because I probably have. But there's a couple things I just wanted to mention in the end game, how I played this. Obviously, it's completely winning, and you probably shouldn't need help with this. But hey, I get it if you do, because that's me, and I could use a lot of help in a lot of areas of the game. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of things that I did here, just for my own sanity, that I just set up so that he couldn't win at all. So it's pretty obvious you want to get your king activated into the center as fast as possible. So he goes here, gets opposition. But now what's important is in the end games, especially whenever you have your pawns in a flat line like this, they cover each other really well. In fact, if you think about the squares that my pawns are covering, they're covering every square across the board here, plus some extras. I'm covering that one as well. Not that one. My king's covering that one, but I'm covering that one as well with these pawns. And those are just outliers because these guys. But nonetheless, this queen side, if you look at it, it's all locked up. Now over here, it would be all locked up if I just push that pawn. So that's exactly what I do. So I push this pawn, and now I'm controlling all of these squares and all of these squares. So there's, I've created a big old line in the board where his king can't get to. And so he's just forced to make pawn moves. So he makes some subtle pawn move just to do something. And now, because this position is so blown wide open, I just wanted to identify any advantage I had and just send that forward. So, but for anybody else who's struggling to come up with ideas, or if you don't understand king pawn in games, they just look like a blur to you. What you can recognize about this position is that the a pawn is passed. Always look for your passed pawns first. If you have a passed pawn, move those. So by moving my pass pawn, what I'm saying is, okay, your king has to get over there, and it has to get over there pronto, because if it doesn't, this guy's just going to go to the edge of the board and promote, because there's no other piece you have that can do anything about it. So he literally just has to react with his king. So then he goes king c4. And now what's important, by going king c4, he's actually opened up a square for my king to get in towards his pawns. And now you could calculate all this out if you want to, but there's really no need. He has 2 weaknesses that he has to address. One is the passed pawn on a5. He has to do something about that, otherwise it will promote. But he also has to do something about his pawns over here that cannot protect each other, and they're going to be captured by my king. He can't do both, and that's why this is so losing. There's probably a world where I have some stupid double pawn structure, and this is actually still a draw, even though I'm up like 4 pawns, because he can defend against both weaknesses. So it's important to recognize why it's winning, and that's why. And I believe everybody could probably figure that out. But like I said, for the guys who, this stuff just looks like magic, I know it does to me a lot of the times. So I just wanted to make sure in my own head that I play this out correctly. And I liked both of these moves that I did here. He did have to go this way. And now I took just a couple seconds here on my next move because I wanted to make sure, after he captures, I didn't want to have to calculate all this out. And I only have a minute on the clock. So what I wanted to double check, again, in these pawn endgames, the easiest thing to look at is whenever they're flat like this, they cover all the squares in front of them. And so if I'm looking at this, I can see that between these 3 pawns, I have all of these squares covered. And that's important because that means there's no way for his king to infiltrate and create a passed pawn. I cannot tell you how many super winning endgames I've lost because I have let this happen, because instead of just this position, I had, hang on, let me do this. I had this position where I was like here. And then I'm sure this is still super winning for me, but the idea is that, he does this, I do this, he goes here, I go here, he goes here, I go here, he goes here, I start pushing my pawn, he starts pushing his, and somehow he'll be faster. I don't think he is in this case, but maybe he is. Yeah, there's a perfect example. If he didn't put his king there, this would be check, and now he'd be winning, right? So just little stuff like that. This is just an example of how I can have all the majority I want on the king side, but if I let his king in, it can be losing very easily. So that was something I was terrified of. So I took a second, took a breather. I said, okay, can he get in? No, he cannot. So I just need to leave those pawns, and I'm just winning. So I just walked up with my king. Again, I wasn't worried about making the most accurate or the best moves. I just said, nope, don't need to worry about it. I'm just going to put my king on my square. And then he threw this pawn forward. I mean, everything's losing for him, obviously. And I just started marching my pawn. Again, no calculation necessary. I played all these moves with like a second because it was just as soon as his king was going to get in range, I was going to react to it. But it was never in range. So he goes here, I go here. Again, I'm controlling the promotion square. So the only way he'd be able to stop this pawn is if he could get to it before it could get to f3. And I mean, he's way far away, but you can see what this looks like. I get to f3, he makes some random king move. He does some other stuff. I promote to a queen. And now, I mean, I'm sure everybody could see how you could win this game, but I'll just play it out to the end so you can see how I didn't stalemate him. In these kinds of end games, whenever I do have a queen, I like to just get him to a position where he's cut off and I can see he has several different moves, and then I just promote another piece. I don't care about trying to do the quickest, most efficient checkmate, which I've noticed is probably a small flaw. I've had some games where that actually turns around on me. And I don't think I've ever stalemated anybody, but I've definitely run out of time when I had like a mate in one that I just literally wasn't looking for, and then I get flagged. And because I wasn't looking for the mate in one, yeah, I mean, I'm just getting flagged for trying to be stubborn about playing these very obvious moves and just making sure he can't get stalemated. But yeah, so he puts me in this position. You know, he's trying to see if he can just, you know, cheekily win the queen or maybe put himself in a stalemate position. I make sure I move with a check. He moves here. I took like 2 or 3 seconds just to make sure he had several moves. I saw he had all 3 of these moves. So I said, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and promote again. He makes some random move. And now I say, okay, every move's going to come with check. So we get check here, check, abusing the pin. He can't take on en passant. And then I just check again. And then we have it. We got a weird looking little checkmate with 2 queens. Nothing fancy about it. Very simple game that was decided a long time ago, but I just wanted to make sure that it was simple and clean, and I won this with 20 seconds on my clock, which for me is an abundance of time. If I'm winning with anything more than 5 seconds on my clock, it means I did stellar time management that game. So I was really happy with this one, and I just wanted to do a quick recording about it, just to kind of try and help out, you know, the little guy who's maybe struggling around 1400 elo, and he has games where, you know, he's playing too fast, or he feels like he's you know, looking for too many tactics and not seeing obvious positional moves. You know, this is just what, like, the ideas that go through my head. And I you know, I'm, like I said, I'm 1500 1700 elo approximately on chess.com, which I'm aware isn't super high, but the point is that these are the guys that you're losing to. If you're 1500 and, you know, you're having a hard time, it's people like me that are beating you. And this is why, you know, this is the stuff that's going through my head. I'm just double checking for tactics, playing quick, simple, obvious moves, you know, once I realize they're solid, and I'm just making sure that I'm prophylactic. I'm seeing your ideas. I'm not letting you have it. I'm trying to cause you problems. And it's nothing major. It's nothing crazy. It's nothing special. You know, I'm not looking 25 moves deep. I don't know opening theory like the back of my hand. It's just very logical stuff all the way through. And the more uncomfortable I can make you, the better off I feel. And yeah, I wanted to show what that looks like. I will also add, just kind of as a note, not to rant too much, but I think computer analysis can be kind of tricky in games like this, because if you look at the computer at quite a few points early on in the game, it thinks it's totally even for him. Like, it considers it totally even. I think even back, well, here, let me pop up the evaluation right here. So you guys can't see it, but like, not at this point. So it's like 0.2, 0.4. It considers it, I'm sorry, those were minus 0.4. But now it's like 0.3 in his favor here, right? So, but he's being, like we discussed earlier in the game, he's kind of blocked off his bishop, and now he has to waste a tempo with his queen to go somewhere else. And it just looks very strange. The move they actually preferred for him is just to go ahead and do a queenside castle, because you are getting out of the pin. So if I capture, then he can recapture my queen. But I don't think that's going to be very comfortable for a human here. It may have been more consistent because that is what he was trying to set up. But, you know, your queen gets attacked, you're in the opening, you're wanting to play quick, you just react to the attack, right? And from this point on, it gives me a pretty significant edge. It's like negative 0.8. And then basically no matter what I do, it keeps that advantage. And that advantage is just kept up. With this move, I am giving him the initiative for getting the pawn, so it's actually reading the evaluation as negative 0.7 rather than like, negative 1.5 or something, because it's just so easy for him to start kicking my queen around. He does keep the advantage. But again, as you saw in the game, all of these very logical moves that I play and that he play just leads to me still being ahead. Because at this point, whenever he makes this move, it's 2.8. Like, this is what they call his giant blunder, because he's dropping yet another pawn, which I agree, it's not a good move, but like, what else are you going to play? If you go for this is the computer's top recommendation. It still says I'm better off. It says I'm better off with a number of moves, but the obvious one and the one I was going to play is this. And so I keep my advantage. The position's still simple. There's not much you can do. This pawn's still attacked twice. It's still uncomfortable for him. What are you going to do? Are you going to defend it this way? Are you going to defend it this way? There's a lot of questions to be answered, and this would have been the way to go. Like I said, this is what the computer recommends, but I just wanted to show an example of how focusing too much on the computer analysis can be strange, because should he have spent more time on, knight e2 so that he didn't get bamboozled from there? Or maybe he shouldn't have taken on f6 so hastily after all. This only gives him a 0.2 advantage. Maybe he could have went for more. Or maybe he shouldn't have taken here. I don't know. So that's just a couple of things just to kind of think about. That the computer analysis can be a little weird. Try to look at it from a human's point of view and say, okay, why was this move good? And like I said, you're trying to move quickly out of the opening, you're wasting tempo. That's the reasons that I use to make that move. And you can see the human response falls in line with that. And it makes it a lot easier for me to play, a lot easier for me to set up tactics, get the initiative, and push for a win. So anyway, I'll shut up. Video's a little long-winded. I just wanted to go over a couple things. I hope somebody gets something good out of it. If you like the video, drop a like. If you want to subscribe, you can. I plan on making more of these. Aside from that, I will talk to you guys in the next video. Bye.